Hey everyone, welcome back to So Arizona. Today I'm going to show you from start to finish how to plant a tree in your garden. It is mid-October and fall, in my opinion, is the best time of year to add all kinds of shrubs and trees to your garden, whether they be fruiting or ornamental. And that's because the ground temperatures are still nice and warm, but the ambient temperatures are starting to cool down. So it's a perfect time for the plant to get established, develop some nice roots before heading into winter for a long winter's nap, and then waking up in the spring to really start growing before we get those hot temperatures. You can start trees in the spring, but I find that they tend to get a little stressed out because they have such a small window of time to get started before we get those hot temperatures for the summer. So I'm going to cover how to prep the area, how to plant the tree, and then how to care for it once it gets established. That way you know exactly what you need to know going into fall to plant trees of your own in your garden. I am planting a Keto fig today. This came from a cutting that I took 2 years ago from my original Keto fig. I love this variety. It has survived drought. It has survived 110 degree temperatures, gopher attacks, and anything else that you can imagine. And it has just taken it all in a stride. I've lost several other varieties of trees back here in this row that I'm trying to establish for figs from gophers. I've had a serious problem with them, but for whatever reason, they do not seem to like these Keto figs. I have the original Keto fig tree that I started with. I got that tree from a plant sale at the Mission Garden a few years ago. I took a cutting from it and I now have a pretty established tree. I'll show you in just a minute from that. And this one is my most recent cutting. Usually in mid-January or so, you want to take a cutting from your tree because you want to get it before it breaks dormancy, before it leaves out. And so I did that. I took it in the house and I potted it up, and once it rooted, then I put it into bigger pots as it grew, and it was under lights on my light rack. This spring I brought it outside and put it under the dappled shade of a mesquite tree, and I just put an irrigation line in it, and it has grown really tall, and it actually has some figs on it, which is really cool to see. So now that it's fall and it's starting to cool down, I'm going to be putting it in the ground. I have a space that runs along the back of my garden against a wall that I am trying to establish a row of fig trees. And so I've got quite a few of various sizes. The one that I had in this space did not make it over the summer, so I am going to replace it with this fig tree that I started from a cutting. So the majority of the roots on trees are going to occupy the first 2 feet of soil, and those are going to support the tree and they're going to absorb the nutrients. So when you're watering your tree as it gets established, think about watering it to a depth of at least 2 feet to encourage the roots to go down, following that water and that moisture. Those roots are going to spread between 3 and 5 feet of the canopy. So when you're prepping your space, think about loosening up the soil around 3 to 5 feet of the space that you are going to be planting your tree. If you're working with a tree that's grafted, you don't want that graft union to be buried beneath the soil because the moisture and the soil will stimulate the rootstock to grow, and that's not what you want. You also don't want to bury a tree that is not grafted below the soil line either. So where the root and the trunk meet, you want that to be above the soil because water pooling and moisture can cause rot to happen on that trunk. If you're working with a grafted tree, make sure you point the graft union to the north, and that is because it can be very sensitive to the heat and to the sun. So you want to make sure that it is pointed away from direct sun, not towards it. If you're purchasing a tree or a shrub, it is a little counterintuitive. You might think buying the bigger tree or shrub will actually establish more quickly, but that's actually not true. Getting one that is a 5 to 15 gallon is going to establish better and more quickly than the larger trees. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is move this irrigation line out of the way from where the original tree that did not make it was. I'm going to rake away all of the mulch, and that's because, like I said, I'm going to prep the soil and loosen it around 3 to 5 feet from the root ball of the tree to really make a space that is soft enough and moist enough for those new tree roots to become established in this space. So let me do that. I had a gopher basket in here to try to protect that other tree. So I'm gonna have to dig that up too, just to get that out of the way. This will be a little tricky because I've got a little seedling of a golden oregano here. I was trying to deter the gophers by planting some herbs. Let's get this basket out of the way. I'm just going to go through and loosen the soil. Now this soil is already really loose because I had already prepped this area for the tree that I planted in the spring that didn't make it. So we'll just give it just a real loose fluff. If you're planting your tree in a new space, just make sure that you are prepping the space and loosening the soil all around where the tree is. All right, so I have my hole dug. It's about 3 times the width of the root ball and the exact same depth as the root ball. All right, so just to review, we have tilled the area around the planting hole by 3 to 5 feet around that space, and we have loosened the soil down to a depth of 8 to 10 inches. We dug our planting hole, and that is going to be about 3 times the width of the root ball and the same height or depth as the root ball. It's pretty common to think that you need to put amendments or compost into the hole rather than use native soil, but don't do that because that can actually inhibit the development and the establishment of good root systems. That's because if you're adding compost to your planting hole, you're creating kind of a little container, and those roots, if they don't have to work hard and go out to seek nutrients and moisture because they have all of that nice compost right in the hole, they're not going to. But the way to get a nice, strong, long-lived tree is to encourage root systems to go out and down in search of nutrients and moisture. So when you're planting your tree, don't add any amendments to the planting hole. Just backfill in as you plant the tree with native soil. If you think that you're low in nitrogen or some other nutrient, you can wait and add that the following year, but not at planting time. So I am working with a tree that is not grafted. This is one that I have started, as I said, from a cutting myself. So I am just going to show you how to get this out of the pot. When you're trying to get your tree out of the pot, it can be tempting to just grab a hold of the trunk and pull up, but don't do that. What you want to do is you want to put your pot down and roll it around a bit, being careful not to break the top of the tree, and just loosen it up. You can give it a little push like this, and then you can start to scoot that out so that it is not damaging the trunk in any way. So just pull on the pot, not on the tree. Just use your hand to support it. So these roots are spiraling around. So before you plant this, you want to take a tool and loosen this. I like using this one just to kind of take the prongs and just rake on the outside of the root ball. Not too violently, but just enough to stimulate those roots a bit. All right, so we will just kind of rake like that just to stimulate the roots. That will help encourage them to start spreading out and doing their thing like that. And when I put this in, I see that I have gone a little too deep, so I will have to add some soil back to this. So this though is nice and wide around here, which is what you want. You want 3 to 4 times the size. So if I put this on this side, I could probably get 3 of them in here, just about. Then I have the soil around it tilled to about 8 to 10 inches all the way around 5 feet out. That way the soil is nice and soft and those roots can spread out easily without being too impeded by hard rocky ground. So let me go ahead and fix this depth on this planting hole. We'll add a little bit back in, and sometimes you just have to do a little bit at a time and make sure that you get it right. What I like to do is actually add just a little bit more than I need, because over time, since the soil has been loosened, it will probably sink down, and you don't want these roots to go lower than the soil line, like I said, because you don't want to have problems with rotting. Let's put this in here. You may notice that this has a little side shoot, and I will probably remove this, but I may actually wait until the winter time during dormancy and take another cutting so I can get another free tree out of this. So we'll see how that goes. Try to center it as best you can, and then you just simply backfill your soil in. So let's do that. I'm just going to work my way around. You may notice that the soil looks very dark, and no, it does not have compost in it. I have been really working on my soil for quite a few years, adding mulch and adding cover crops, and it has slowly over time changed from being a very light sandy color to being this nice rich soil. I mean, just look at that. How beautiful is that soil? But it has taken, I think I'm on my 4th year now. So it takes a long time. All right, now I have the tree completely buried the way I want to. It's leaning a little bit this way, probably because it was underneath the shade. But now what I'm going to do is something called heel in. And you just take your heel around the outside edge and just give it a nice firm press. Now I'm not doing this to the entire root ball, just to the outer perimeter. And I'm doing this, for one, to make sure that it's nice and straight. And for another, this is going to help me to build a little irrigation berm or a well around the tree for watering it as it gets established. So let me show you how I do that. All right, I've got the tree planted, I've got it healed in well, and it's already created a bit of a ridge around the root ball of the tree. So I'm coming out about 2 to 3 feet for this watering well or watering berm, and I am going to just form it up, and that way when I'm watering, it will keep the water right in that area so that it can soak down. When you water your tree, you may need to do it almost daily, depending on the temperature and the time of year, until it gets established. And so what I will do is come out and check it, and I will water it to a depth of the root ball. So if your root ball is 2 feet, you want to water it to that depth. You can check and see how far down you're watering by using a water probe, and I'll show you that in just a minute. And that will take the guesswork out of watering your landscaping trees and plants. That way you know that you're watering deeply enough. So let's go ahead and mound this up. I'll show you how I do it, and then we'll talk about watering. So what I like to do is just pull the soil away from the trunk of the tree to make sure that I have not buried it too far. And at first, I'm just going to put this watering well or watering berm about 12 to 18 inches away from this tree. But as the tree grows, I'm going to widen this watering berm or watering well so that it is following the edge of the canopy here. You want to make sure that you're always watering out away from the trunk of the tree and at the edge of the canopy. That will keep the roots seeking and going outward to find that water. So I am just going to firm this in like this. You can make it taller or shorter depending on your soil. It really is up to you. I'm not going to get too picky about this. So this is something you'll have to come through and do as just part of your regular maintenance. As you're checking your irrigation lines in the fall, would be a great time to adjust this to whatever the distance or the amount of growth your tree is put on for that particular season. But it really is just about putting enough of an edge on that to keep the water right in here. So we're not done yet though. Now that we have the tree placed and we have the watering berm in, I'm going to be placing some mulch on top. What I want to do is mulch this entire area. So the 3 to 5 feet around the entire planting area is going to get mulch, and I'm going to add 2 to 4 inches of wood chips to this area, and that is going to maintain the soil temperature. It's going to support the soil life and the fungi, and it is also going to conserve water moisture so that it doesn't dry out, and that's going to save you a lot on your water bill, as well as just provide consistent moisture in the soil for your tree. I am just using some wood chips here that I will put around the base. You could use compost, straw, but I find wood chips really support the fungal life in the soil around the tree much better, and that the trees perform better with wood chips or bark around it. So make sure that you don't have that mulch around the trunk of the tree. You want to keep that free. And then, last but not least, I am going to place my irrigation line around here. This is drip line, and I will probably have to get some landscaping pins to fix it in place, because what I want to do is make sure that it goes out and around to the canopy edge. You always want to keep your drip line out near the canopy edge like this. So I'm going to pin this down, and then I'm going to get my garden hose, and I'm going to show you how to water it and how to check it with a soil probe. We all have different soils in our gardens. Some of us are lucky enough to have loam, like I do for the most part, and some of us have straight sand. Some of us have layers of caliche, and some of us have clay, and that is going to affect how much watering, how often you're going to have to do, because water moves through sand very quickly, and so if you have sandy soil, your plants are going to dry out really fast. If you have clay soil, that is going to hold on to the water and keep it there for much longer, not allowing it to drain very quickly at all, so you'll have to water it much less. If you have caliche, you may find that it's basically acting like a container and just holding the water there. So before you dig your planting hole for a tree or a shrub, what you need to do is a drainage test, and this can easily be done with a shovel and a little bit of effort. What you do is dig a hole about a foot deep, and then you fill it up with water, and you want to do this twice during a 24-hour period. If that water drains thoroughly, then you know you have good drainage in the space. If the water doesn't drain within a 24-hour period, then you probably have some either really heavy clay or hard pan or caliche, but you can still plant in that area. What you need to do is add something called chimneys, and what you do is basically punch through that caliche or hard pan in a few different spots, and that way you're basically punching little drainage holes around that area. So you don't have to remove all of that hard pan or caliche, but you do need to add some drainage holes or chimneys to that. So check that before you dig your hole to make sure that you're in a good spot, or that you can do the necessary changes to that area before you plant your tree. Provide water and water it really well. Just fill up that well that we've made and just keep watering it. Once you give your tree a good water, you want to check it with the soil probe to make sure that you are watering it to a depth of the root ball, or to 2 to 3 feet, depending on the size of the root ball. Your watering probe is going to look like this. It'll be a T-shaped handle on top of a metal post. I got this one at Home Depot. You could probably order them online too, or find them at a local hardware store. And you can also find them at Pima County Extension Office. You can buy those there, as well as at their plant sales that they have in the spring and fall. And this is just going to show you, much like checking the oil, it will show you the line where the moisture begins and ends. And so when I checked this one, it was at about 2.5 feet. So I know that I watered it deeply enough. This takes the guesswork out of it, and I really recommend this, especially when you're trying to establish your plants, as well as find a good irrigation schedule for your soil in your area, because then you're not guessing, you know exactly how deeply you're watering. If you're finding that your tree needs a little bit of support, either because the trunk is just not strong enough yet or because it's in a windy location, you can add stakes. What you want to do is place those stakes out away from the planting hole in the portion of the soil that is much more firm, because you don't want those to be wiggling. That's not going to really help anything. You want 2 stakes only. You want to put them at right angles to the prevailing wind. The ties that you use need to be of a material that won't damage the trunk of your tree. So if you're using any kind of a wire, make sure it has a rubber coating, or you can use some sort of an elastic band, or something that is not going to dig into or rub the trunk of the tree to damage it in any way. You want to cut the stakes so that they are underneath the canopy, because if you have a really tall stake, as the wind is blowing that canopy around, you don't want it to damage the upper branches and the canopy. So make sure those stakes are below the canopy. And as you're placing the stakes, just put it on your calendar to remove those between 6 and 12 months afterwards, because you want to give that tree a chance to strengthen its trunk on its own. So within 6 to 12 months, those roots will have really grown out and established enough so that they are going to provide support for the tree. And now it's time for the tree to strengthen the trunk and to stand on its own. So in 6 to 12 months, remove the stakes. There's the tree. I'm just going to replace the mulch all around the outside of it where I loosen the soil, and then it is going to join its other little fig brothers and sisters and hopefully give me some delicious fruits. If you would like to have a video about how to start fig trees from cuttings, I can do that for you. The best time is in late winter to get your cuttings before the tree leaves out. So I can time that video for around the time that it's best to take the cutting and start your new fig tree. If that would be helpful for you, please let me know in the comments below and I can make that video. All right, I hope this helps you with planting your trees from A to Z. It is mid-October, perfect time. So go grab your trees and get planting. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Kara from Arizona. Until next time, happy gardening.